The room felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the way my son leaned forward in my old leather chair. My chair, with that eager smile I once trusted. Sunlight streamed through the bay windows of the home I'd built with my own hands over 40 years ago, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors I'd installed during weekends away from the construction site. "Dad, I've been working on something big," Michael said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of excitement I'd heard since he was a boy showing me model airplanes. "Something that's going to change everything for us." At 67, I'd learned to be cautious about promises of change. Life had taught me that lesson through calloused hands, a permanently stiff back, and the empty space in my bed where Martha had slept for 38 years before cancer took her. But Michael was my son, my only child, and despite my weathered skepticism, I wanted to believe in him. "What is it?" I asked, settling into the chair across from him, feeling the slight creak in my knees. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of the refrigerator Martha had insisted on replacing just before she got sick. Top of the line, she'd called it, built to last. Michael's smile widened as he reached into his leather messenger bag. Italian, if I had to guess, probably costing more than I'd ever spent on a piece of luggage in my life. He pulled out a thick document, professionally bound, and held it reverently for a moment before placing it on the coffee table between us. "You'll be proud of me," he said, sliding it toward me with manicured fingers that had never known the sting of cement or the bite of a saw. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Dad." I reached for my reading glasses, the cheap ones I'd picked up at the drugstore after my last prescription pair broke. The document was titled Bridge Capital Ventures, Secured Loan Agreement, and beneath it, in bold numbers that made my stomach tighten, $250,000. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. I'd seen enough contracts in my 45 years running Harmon Construction to recognize the language of money changing hands. "It's a loan, Dad," Michael said, leaning forward, his eyes bright with an intensity that reminded me of Martha when she got excited about something. "For an investment opportunity that's absolutely guaranteed. My friend James, you remember James Cooper from college. He's been making a killing in commercial real estate development in Phoenix. The returns are insane, Dad. We're talking 30, maybe 40% in 18 months. I flipped through the pages, my eyes catching phrases like secured by real property and first position lien and personal guarantee. The legal jargon was dense, but I'd negotiated enough construction contracts to understand the gist. Someone wanted my money, and they were willing to put something valuable up as collateral to get it. "And you need me to casing this loan?" I asked, though the sinking feeling in my gut told me it was worse than that. Michael's smile faltered just slightly. "Not exactly. The loan would be in your name. Your credit score is perfect and you have the equity in this house, but I'll be managing everything. You won't have to lift a finger." I continued reading, my finger tracing along the lines as I squinted through my glasses. There it was, on page 3. Secured by real property located at 1847 Oakwood Drive, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My home. The home I'd built for Martha when we were just starting out. The home where we'd raised Michael. The home that was now paid off and represented my retirement security. "You want to put up my house as collateral," I said, not a question but a statement of fact. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Michael waved his hand dismissively. "It's just a formality, Dad. The investment is rock solid. James has done this dozens of times. But the banks require collateral. You know how they are since the recession. Too cautious." Perhaps there was a time when that casual dismissal of risk would have gone unchallenged. Before Martha died. Before I watched my wife of nearly 4 decades wither away despite every treatment, every specialist, every prayer. Before I understood how quickly everything you love can be taken away. "Tell me more about this investment," I said, closing the document and taking off my glasses. I wanted to look my son in the eyes for this part. Michael launched into his pitch with practiced ease. "Office buildings in a rapidly developing area of Phoenix. pre-approved tenants waiting to sign leases, James Cooper's impressive track record, the exploding Arizona market. It all sounded impressive, rehearsed, and utterly foreign to me. As he spoke, I studied my son's face. The eager eyes, the confident smile, the expensive haircut and the watch that probably cost more than my first car. Michael had always been smart, smarter than me, Martha used to say proudly. He'd gone to Penn State on a partial scholarship, with Martha and I covering the rest by taking out a second mortgage that we'd only paid off 5 years ago. He'd gotten his business degree and moved to Philadelphia, where he worked for an investment firm doing something with portfolios that he'd explained to me many times but that I never fully grasped. What I did grasp was that Michael made good money, or at least spent like he did. The luxury apartment in Center City, the European vacations, the restaurants where a meal cost what I used to make in a day. But lately, there had been signs of strain. Phone calls that he took in another room, mentions of a tough market, a canceled visit last Christmas with a vague explanation about work demands. "So what do you think?" Michael asked, finishing his pitch with an expectant smile. "Are you in? We need to move fast on this. There are other investors circling." I looked around my living room at the faded photographs on the wall. Martha and me on our wedding day, Michael's high school graduation, the three of us at the Grand Canyon on that road trip when Michael was 12. A lifetime of memories contained within these walls. "I need time to think about it," I said finally. Michael's smile tightened. "Dad, this opportunity won't wait. James needs an answer by the end of the week. I'm trying to do something good for us here. For our future." "Our future," I repeated slowly. "Michael, I'm 67 years old. My future is this house and my pension from the union. That's what Martha and I worked for. That's what we planned. And that's exactly why we need to do this," Michael pressed, leaning forward. "Your pension barely covers the property taxes and utilities on this place. You deserve better. Don't you want to enjoy your retirement? Travel, see the world like you and Mom always talked about?" The mention of Martha and our dreams felt like a physical blow. We had talked about traveling after retirement, the national parks, maybe Europe. But then came her diagnosis, and those dreams were replaced by hospital corridors and medication schedules. "Let me look over the paperwork," I said, gathering the document. "I'll call you tomorrow." Michael looked like he wanted to argue but then checked his watch, that expensive watch, and nodded. "Sure, Dad, just don't take too long, okay? This is time sensitive." After he left, I sat in the quiet house, the loan agreement heavy in my hands. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Was I just being an old man afraid of change? Was I failing to see an opportunity because it came in unfamiliar packaging? Or was my son asking me to risk everything I had on a promise and a smile? I reached for the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Bill, it's Frank Harmon. Listen, I need some advice about an investment opportunity Michael's brought me. Can you come over? And bring your reading glasses. Mine aren't cutting it anymore." Bill Reynolds had been my friend since we worked together on our first construction job out of high school. He'd gone on to become an accountant, handling the books for Harmon Construction until I sold the business 5 years ago. If anyone could make sense of this proposal, it was Bill. As I waited for him to arrive, I walked through my house, running my hand along the walls I'd built, feeling the solid craftsmanship beneath my fingers. This house wasn't just a building. It was the physical manifestation of my life's work, of Martha's and my shared dreams, of the family we'd created. And now my son wanted me to risk losing it all on a promise of quick returns and a better future. The uneasiness in my stomach grew as I remembered something my father had told me long ago. "If it sounds too good to be true, Frank, it probably is." But this wasn't some stranger making promises. This was Michael, my son. The knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Bill stood on the porch, his familiar weathered face a welcome sight. "Frank," he said, giving me a firm handshake that turned into a brief hug. "What's this investment your boys got you looking at?" I handed him the document and watched as his expression changed from curiosity to concern as he flipped through the pages. By the time he looked up, the concern had deepened to something more troubling. "Frank," he said carefully, "we need to talk about this, and you're not going to like what I have to say." As Bill began to explain what he was seeing in those pages, I felt a cold dread settle over me. The kind of dread I hadn't felt since the doctor had called us back into his office to discuss Martha's test results. Something was very wrong, and my son was at the center of it. "This isn't just risky, Frank. It's reckless," Bill said, tapping the loan agreement with his index finger. We were sitting at my kitchen table, the document spread between us like a map to disaster. The overhead light I'd installed when Martha complained about the dimness while cooking cast harsh shadows on Bill's face, deepening the lines of concern. "Explain it to me in simple terms," I said, pouring us each another cup of coffee. Martha's ceramic mugs, hand-painted at that art studio she loved in Carlisle, felt solid and reassuring in my grip. Bill took a sip and set the mug down carefully. "First off, this isn't a standard investment. It's a hard money loan, high interest, short term, secured by real estate. But you're not the lender here, you're the borrower. You'd be taking out a $250,000 loan against your house and giving that money to this James Cooper character for his development project." "But Michael said the returns would be 30 to 40%, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, they sounded naive. Bill gave me a patient look. "Frank, think about it. If this deal could genuinely return 40% in 18 months, why would this developer be seeking private loans? Why not go to a bank or established investors? The interest rate on this loan is 12%. That means for you to make money, Cooper would need to generate returns well above that just to cover your loan costs, let alone provide the profit Michael's talking about." I stared into my coffee, watching the light play on its surface. Martha had always said I made it too strong. "You're building houses, not fortifying soldiers for battle," she'd joke. "There's more," Bill continued, flipping to another page. "The terms here are brutal. Balloon payment at 18 months. Prepayment penalties. And if there's a default, you're not just looking at losing your house. There's a deficiency clause that means they can come after your other assets too. Your savings, your pension." "Jesus," I muttered. The full weight of what Michael was asking me to do was settling on my shoulders like a concrete slab. But why would he bring me something like this? He knows I'm not wealthy. This house and my pension are all I have. Bill's expression softened. "How's Michael doing financially? Really doing, not just what he shows on the surface?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been wondering the same thing, hadn't I? The signs had been there. The phone calls he wouldn't take in front of me, the canceled visits, the subtle shift from talking about his successes to focusing on future opportunities. "I don't know," I admitted. "He always seems to be doing well. The nice apartment, the clothes, the lifestyle, but lately, I don't know, Bill, something's felt off." Bill nodded slowly. "I think you need to find out. Before you sign anything, you need the full picture." After Bill left, I sat alone at the kitchen table for a long time. The house creaked and settled around me, familiar sounds that had become the soundtrack of my widowhood. Martha would know what to do. She always had better instincts about people, even our son, especially our son. I reached for my laptop, a simple model that Michael had insisted on buying me last Christmas to replace my ancient desktop. "You need to join the 21st century, Dad," he'd said with that indulgent smile he sometimes got when talking to me, like I was a child who needed guidance rather than his father. Opening a browser, I hesitated. What exactly was I looking for? Proof that my son was lying to me, evidence that he was in trouble. Neither prospect brought me any comfort, but I needed to know. I started with a simple search. James Cooper Real Estate Phoenix. The results were underwhelming. No prominent developer, no company websites, just a few scattered LinkedIn profiles that didn't seem to match the high-flying investor Michael had described. Next, I tried searching for Bridge Capital Ventures, the company named on the loan document. This yielded more results, but nothing substantial. No official website, just mentions in forum posts about investment opportunities, and a few complaints on consumer watchdog sites that made my stomach tighten further. I wasn't a technology expert, but I knew enough to check public records. Arizona had an online database for property ownership. I spent an hour navigating the clunky interface, searching for properties owned by James Cooper or Bridge Capital Ventures in the Phoenix area. Nothing significant appeared. By midnight, my eyes were burning from staring at the screen, but I had learned enough to know that Bill's concerns were justified. This investment opportunity, if it could even be called that, was looking more and more like a mirage. Or worse, a deliberate deception. The thought that my own son might be trying to deceive me was almost unbearable. There had to be another explanation. Maybe Michael himself had been misled. Maybe he genuinely believed in this opportunity and was just being naive. I needed to talk to him directly, but not over the phone. I needed to see his face when I asked the hard questions. The next morning, I called Michael's office in Philadelphia. "Sentinel Investments, how may I direct your call?" a polished female voice answered. "Michael Harmon, please," I said, suddenly aware of how rough my voice sounded in contrast. "I'm sorry Mr. Harmon is unavailable. Would you like to leave a message?" "This is his father. It's important." A pause. "One moment, please." The hold music played for nearly a minute before the receptionist returned. "I'm sorry Mr. Harmon is in meetings all day. He asked if you could call him on his cell phone." "I'll do that, thank you." I hung up, a new uneasiness settling over me. In all the years Michael had worked at Sentinel, I'd never had trouble reaching him at the office. Instead of calling his cell, I made a decision. I packed an overnight bag, locked up the house, and drove to Philadelphia. The 3-hour drive gave me plenty of time to think, to rehearse what I would say to my son when I saw him. I arrived at Michael's apartment building in Center City around 2 in the afternoon. It was an impressive high-rise with a doorman and a marble lobby that made me feel immediately out of place in my worn jeans and flannel shirt. "I'm here to see Michael Harmon," I told the doorman. "I'm his father." The young man checked his computer. "I don't see Mr. Harmon on the resident list, sir." I frowned. "Apartment 15-6. He's been living here for at least 5 years." Another check of the computer. "I'm sorry, sir. That unit is registered to a Jennifer Tate. She's been the resident for about 8 months now." The floor seemed to shift beneath my feet. There must be some mistake. "My son, Michael Harmon. He works at Sentinel Investments. This is his building." The doorman's expression softened with sympathy that made my heart sink. "Sir, I've been working here for 3 years. I don't recall a Michael Harmon. Would you like me to call up to Miss Tate's apartment to check if she knows him?" "No," I said quickly, backing toward the door. "No, that won't be necessary, thank you." Outside, I leaned against the building's stone facade, trying to make sense of what I'd just learned. Michael didn't live here, had never lived here, at least not in the time this doorman had worked in the building. But I'd visited him here, hadn't I? I tried to recall the last time I'd actually been inside his apartment. 2 years ago. 3. He usually came to visit me in Harrisburg, saying it was easier for him to get away than for me to navigate Philadelphia traffic. With shaking hands, I took out my phone and dialed the number for Sentinel Investments again. "Sentinel Investments, how may I direct your call?" "Human Resources Department, please," I said, an idea forming. When the HR representative answered, I took a deep breath. "Hello, this is Richard Barnett from Keystone Insurance. We're updating our records for your employee benefits plan, and I need to verify employment for a Michael Harmon." A brief pause. "I don't show a Michael Harmon currently employed with us. Let me check our former employee database." My heart pounded in my ears as I waited. Yes, we did have a Michael Harmon in our advisory division, but he left the company about 18 months ago. 18 months. Around the time his visits became less frequent. Around the time the phone calls started happening in other rooms. "Thank you," I managed to say before hanging up. I stood on the busy Philadelphia street, people rushing past me in both directions, feeling more alone than I had since Martha's funeral. My son had been lying to me. For at least 18 months, possibly longer, he had maintained the fiction of a job he no longer had, an apartment he no longer lived in. And now he wanted me to take out a loan against my house for $250,000. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath it was a more urgent concern. Where was Michael now? What kind of trouble was he in? And who was James Cooper? I needed answers, and there was only one person who could provide them. I pulled out my phone again and called Michael's cell. "Dad," he answered on the second ring, sounding surprised. "I thought you were going to call yesterday." "Where are you right now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "At work, of course." "Why? Which work is that, Michael? Sentinel Investments, where you haven't worked for 18 months? Or is it Bridge Capital Ventures?" A long silence followed. When Michael finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. Gone was the confident, slightly condescending tone. In its place was something smaller, tighter. "Dad, I can explain." "I'm in Philadelphia," I said, "standing outside the building where you supposedly live, except you don't. I want to see you, in person, today." Another pause. "Okay," he said finally. "Where are you exactly?" "I'll come to you." I gave him my location, and he promised to be there within an hour. While I waited, I found a coffee shop across the street where I could watch the entrance to the apartment building. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, feeling like a stranger in my own life. When Michael appeared 90 minutes later, I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the expensive suit and the confident stride. He wore jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt, and his hair, usually so perfectly styled, looked like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. He glanced around nervously before spotting me through the coffee shop window. As he walked in and sat across from me, I searched his face for my son, the boy who had once looked at me with unguarded admiration, who had cried on my shoulder when his high school girlfriend broke up with him, who had hugged me fiercely at Martha's funeral and promised we would get through it together. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." "For what exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "For lying about your job, for lying about where you live, or for trying to scam me out of my house." He flinched at the word scam. "It's not like that. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be. I was going to pay you back, with interest." "With money from what investment, Michael?" "I've been looking into your friend James Cooper and his development in Phoenix. There is no development, is there?" Michael's eyes darted around the coffee shop as if looking for an escape route. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicated for me," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Tell me the truth right now, or I'm walking out that door and calling the police to report an attempted fraud." His face crumpled, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the little boy who would come clean about a broken window or a bad grade when confronted directly. "I'm in trouble, Dad, bad trouble." "What kind of trouble?" He lowered his voice even further. "Gambling. It started small, just poker nights with clients, then sports betting, then online. I thought I could win it back. That's what everyone thinks, right? One big score and you're even again." He laughed bitterly. "Except the big score never comes." "How much?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "About 250,000, he admitted. "To some very serious people." "And James Cooper," Michael couldn't meet my eyes, "he's my bookie's collection specialist. He came up with the loan idea, said if I couldn't pay, maybe my family could help out." The coffee turned sour in my stomach. "So this man knows about me, about my house." Michael nodded miserably. "They know everything, Dad. They did their research." I sat back, trying to process the magnitude of what I was hearing. My son had not only lied to me for years, but had now involved me with loan sharks and criminals, had put my home, my security at risk. "These people," I said carefully, "what happens if you don't pay them?" Michael's eyes filled with tears. "They've already broken 2 of my fingers," he whispered, holding up his left hand, which I now noticed was partially bandaged. "That was just a warning. Next time will be worse, much worse." I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw the fear etched in every line of his face. Despite everything, my heart ached for him. He was still my child, Martha's child, even now. "We're going to fix this," I said finally, "but not with a fraudulent loan against my house. We're going to do this the right way." Michael looked up, hope and disbelief warring on his face. "How? First, we're going to the police." "Dad, no," he said, panic rising in his voice. "These guys don't play around. If I go to the police—" "These guys have already committed assault and attempted fraud," I interrupted. "And they're threatening worse. The police need to be involved." "They'll kill me," Michael whispered. I reached across the table and took his uninjured hand in mine. "I won't let that happen, but I need you to trust me. And I need you to tell me everything. No more lies, Michael, not a single one." For a long moment he stared at our hands joined on the table. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay, Dad. No more lies." As we left the coffee shop together, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, disappointment, fear, but also a grim determination. My son had made terrible choices. He had lied to me, betrayed my trust, and put both of us in danger. But he was still my son. And no one, not some thug named James Cooper, not anyone, was going to hurt him again. Not while I had breath in my body. What I didn't yet understand was how complicated this would become, or how deep Michael's deception really went. The loan agreement was just the tip of a very dark iceberg, one that would test the limits of my love for my only child. The police station smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Detective Sarah Reeves sat across from us in an interview room, her dark eyes sharp as she reviewed the notes she'd taken during Michael's statement. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, but had the measured demeanor of someone who'd seen it all. "Let me make sure I understand," she said, looking up at Michael. "You owe $250,000 to an illegal gambling operation run by someone named Victor Mercer. This James Cooper works for Mercer as an enforcer and came up with the scheme to defraud your father out of his home equity to pay your debt." Michael nodded, his eyes fixed on the table. The fluorescent lights accentuated the dark circles under his eyes, the sallowness of his skin. He looked like a man who hadn't slept properly in months. "And they've already assaulted you," Detective Reeves continued, gesturing to Michael's bandaged hand. "Yes," Michael whispered. "2 weeks ago, Cooper and another guy came to my apartment, my real apartment, not the one my dad thought I lived in. They said it was a down payment on what I owed." Detective Reeves made another note. "Did you seek medical attention?" Michael shook his head. "I was too scared. I just wrapped it up myself." "We'll need to document those injuries," she said, then turned to me. "Mr. Harmon, I understand you still have the fraudulent loan documents." I placed the envelope on the table. "Everything's here. The loan was supposed to be in my name, using my house as collateral. The money would go to a company called Bridge Capital Ventures, which I now understand is a shell for this Mercer character." Detective Reeves took the envelope. "This is good. It gives us something concrete to work with." She turned back to Michael. "I need names, addresses, phone numbers, everything you have on Mercer, Cooper, and anyone else involved in this operation." Michael hesitated, fear flashing across his face. "Son," I said quietly, "it's time for the whole truth." He took a deep breath and began listing names, locations, phone numbers. Detective Reeves wrote everything down, occasionally asking for clarification. As Michael spoke, a picture emerged of a sophisticated gambling operation that masqueraded as a legitimate investment firm, targeting professionals like Michael who had access to money but poor impulse control. "We've been building a case against Mercer for months," Detective Reeves said when Michael finished. "Your testimony could be very valuable, but I won't sugarcoat this. These are dangerous people. We'll need to discuss protection options for both of you." "What kind of protection?" I asked. "In the short term, we might place you in a hotel under police surveillance. Long term, it depends on how the case develops and the level of threat." She looked at Michael. "I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Harmon. You have a part in this too. You've been involved in illegal gambling. There could be consequences." Michael nodded, looking miserable but resigned. "I understand. I just want this to be over." Detective Reeves stood. I'm going to bring in my partner and our lieutenant to discuss next steps. Wait here." When she left, Michael and I sat in silence for a moment. The weight of everything that had happened, everything that was still happening, pressed down on us like a physical force. "I'm sorry, Dad," Michael said finally, his voice breaking. "I've ruined everything." I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw past the lies and manipulation to the broken man underneath. "Not everything," I said. "We're still here. We're still fighting." "Why?" he asked, meeting my eyes for the first time since we'd entered the station. "Why are you helping me after what I tried to do to you?" The question caught me off guard, though it shouldn't have. "You're my son," I said simply. "That hasn't changed." "But I tried to—" "I know what you tried to do," I interrupted. "And we'll have to deal with that eventually. But right now, you're in danger and that comes first." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve you." Before I could respond, the door opened, and Detective Reeves returned with two men, an older black man with salt and pepper hair who introduced himself as Lieutenant Washington, and a younger man with a buzz cut who was Detective Reeves's partner, Detective Sloan. "We've got a situation," Lieutenant Washington said without preamble. "A CI just called in. Mercer knows you've come to us, Michael." Michael's face drained of color. "How?" "He's got people everywhere," Washington said grimly, "including, apparently, a contact in this precinct. We need to move you both now." "Move us where?" I asked, feeling the first real stirrings of fear. "Protective custody," Washington replied. "Detective Sloan will drive you to a safe house outside the city. Detective Reeves and I will set up the formal protection order and begin building the case with what you've given us." Everything happened quickly after that. We were hustled out a back entrance of the station and into an unmarked car. Detective Sloan drove us through the city and onto the highway, checking his rearview mirror frequently to ensure we weren't being followed. Michael sat beside me in the backseat, his body tense, jumping at every horn or sudden movement from another vehicle. I reached over and squeezed his uninjured hand. "It's going to be okay," I said, though I wasn't at all sure that was true. The safe house turned out to be a small ranch-style home in a quiet suburb about an hour outside Philadelphia. Detective Sloan checked the perimeter before letting us inside. The house was sparsely furnished but clean, with basic provisions in the kitchen and two bedrooms with fresh linens. "You'll stay here until we've made some progress on the case," Sloan explained. "There's a patrol car stationed at the end of the street, and I'll be here most of the time. If I have to leave, another detective will come to relieve me. Don't answer the door or the phone. Don't go outside. Don't contact anyone." After showing us around, Sloan set up a laptop at the kitchen table and began working, occasionally speaking quietly into his phone. Michael and I retreated to the living room, where we sat in uncomfortable silence, the gravity of our situation settling around us like dust. "I should tell you everything," Michael said eventually. "The whole story, not just what I told the police." I turned to face him. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "It didn't start with gambling, that came later. It started with the job. I lost it almost 2 years ago. Not because of gambling, because of embezzlement." The word hung in the air between us, ugly and damning. "I was managing some client accounts," Michael continued, his voice flat. "Small ones, nothing too high profile. I started borrowing from them to cover some personal expenses. I always intended to pay it back before anyone noticed, but then I needed more and then more after that." "How much?" I asked. "About 80,000 by the time they caught me," he admitted. "They gave me a choice, resign quietly and pay it back, or they'd press charges. I resigned. I've been paying them back in installments from odd jobs, whatever I can get under the table, since no one in finance will hire me now." I closed my eyes, trying to process this new betrayal. "And the gambling. That started as a way to make money after I lost the job. I thought I could win enough to pay back what I'd taken, get my life back on track. I'd always been good at poker in college. But when you're playing with professionals with real stakes—" He trailed off, then added, "I kept losing, but I kept thinking the next hand would turn it around. Then I found Mercer's operation. They extended credit. Lots of it. And the apartment, the lifestyle. How were you maintaining that fiction? Michael laughed bitterly. I wasn't. I've been living in a studio apartment in a terrible neighborhood. When you'd call about visiting, I'd make excuses. When I had to see you, I'd come to Harrisburg. I kept up appearances as best I could when I visited, borrowed clothes, rented cars. I was terrified you'd find out, that you'd be ashamed of me. I am ashamed, I said quietly. Not of you, but of what you've done. There's a difference. Michael nodded, unable to meet my eyes. Why didn't you come to me when you first got in trouble? I could have helped you. How? Michael asked. By remortgaging your house. By draining your retirement savings. The amounts were too big, Dad, and I was too ashamed. I thought I could fix it myself. I wanted to argue, to tell him that no amount was too big when it came to helping my son. But hadn't that thinking led us here? My blind willingness to help had nearly cost me my home. My reluctance to see the truth about Michael, about the man he had become, had nearly made me an accomplice to fraud. Before I could respond, Detective Sloane's phone rang. He answered it, listened intently, then approached us. That was Detective Reeves, he said, his expression grim. There's been a development. Someone broke into your house in Harrisburg, Mr. Harmon. They ransacked the place. My heart sank. How bad is it? Local PD is still assessing the damage, but it appears they were looking for something specific. They bypassed valuables, focused on papers, files, your computer. The loan agreement, I realized. They were looking for the loan agreement. Sloane nodded. That would be my guess, which means they know you haven't signed it yet, and they're desperate to either get it signed or destroy any evidence of the attempted fraud. Or find me, Michael added quietly. Find us. The detective didn't contradict him. We're stepping up security here. Lieutenant Washington is fast-tracking the protection order. I need you both to stay vigilant and follow my instructions to the letter. After Sloane returned to his laptop, Michael turned to me, his face ashen. This is my fault, all of it. Your house is just a house, I finished for him. It can be repaired. But it's your home, you built it for Mom. The mention of Martha sent a pang through my chest. What would she think of all this? Of what our son had become? Of the danger we were now in? She would be heartbroken. But she would also fight like hell to protect her child, no matter what he'd done. On that, at least, we would agree. We'll get through this, I told Michael, though I wasn't sure how. One step at a time. That night I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the creaks and settling of a house I didn't know, thinking about my own home, violated, damaged, and about the son sleeping in the next room. Who was Michael now? The boy I'd raised, the man who had lied to me for years, who had tried to defraud me, or the frightened, broken person who had finally told me the truth? Perhaps he was all of these things. Perhaps we all contain multitudes, capable of both terrible mistakes and genuine redemption. I didn't know if Michael could be redeemed, or if our relationship could ever recover from this betrayal. But I knew I had to try, for Martha's sake, for my own, and even for Michael's sake, the Michael who might still exist beneath the lies and the fear, the son who might yet find his way back to the man we'd raised him to be. As dawn broke, casting unfamiliar shadows on the wall, I made a decision. We wouldn't just hide here, waiting for the police to solve our problems. We would take an active role in fixing this mess, starting with finding a way to pay back Mercer that didn't involve illegal loans or putting my house at risk. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. As long as Michael owed this money, we would never be safe. The safe house became our world. Days blurred together in a routine of anxiety and confinement. Detective Sloane was replaced by other officers on a rotating schedule, each bringing updates that seemed to lead nowhere. The investigation was ongoing. Mercer was being monitored. Michael and I were safer here for now. A week into our protective custody, Lieutenant Washington visited with Detective Reeves to give us a more substantial update. We've been building a case against Mercer for months, Washington explained as we sat around the kitchen table. Your testimony, Michael, along with the fraudulent loan documents, has given us enough to secure warrants for financial records that were previously out of reach. What about James Cooper? I asked. He's the one who assaulted Michael. Washington's expression tightened. Cooper's in the wind. Hasn't been seen since the day you came to the station. What does that mean for us? Michael asked, the fear evident in his voice. It means we keep you here until we can bring Mercer in, Reeves replied. Once we have him in custody, the immediate threat should decrease significantly. And how long will that take? I pressed. Washington and Reeves exchanged a look. We're hoping to move within the next 2 weeks, Washington said carefully. But these investigations can be unpredictable. 2 more weeks of hiding. 2 more weeks of my life on hold. 2 more weeks of wondering if every sound outside was someone coming for us. After the officers left, Michael and I sat in silence for a long time. The weight of our confinement, of the uncertainty, pressed down on both of us. This isn't sustainable, I said finally. We can't just sit here indefinitely, waiting for the police to solve this. Michael looked up, surprise evident on his face. What choice do we have? These people want to kill me, Dad. Maybe you too now. They want their money, I corrected. If they wanted you dead, they would have done it before you went to the police. They broke into my house looking for the loan agreement, not to hurt us. So, what are you suggesting? That we just pay them off? I leaned forward. Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. Michael stared at me. With what money? That's the whole problem, Dad. I don't have $250,000. You don't have $250,000. Not unless you take out that loan they wanted, which would be insane now that we know what's really going on. I've been thinking about this all week, I said. I do have assets. Not cash, but things that could be liquidated. The house, my retirement accounts, the land in upstate New York that your grandfather left me. Dad, no, Michael protested. You can't sacrifice your security, your future. That's exactly what I was trying to avoid by coming clean. After you tried to defraud me, I reminded him, the words sharper than I intended. Michael flinched but didn't argue. I softened my tone. Look, son, the situation is what it is. You owe this money. These people aren't going away. The police might eventually build a case against Mercer, but that doesn't erase your debt, and it doesn't guarantee our safety in the meantime. So you're just going to give them everything you've worked for, everything you and Mom built. The mention of Martha sent a familiar pang through my chest. Your mother would want us safe. She would want this nightmare to end. I paused, then added, but no, I'm not just going to hand over everything. I have a plan. Michael looked skeptical but leaned forward. What kind of plan? We negotiate, I said simply. These people are businessmen, albeit terrible ones. They want their money. They don't want the heat that would come with hurting us, especially now that the police are involved. So we offer them a deal, a significant portion of what you owe in exchange for wiping the slate clean. You think they'd go for that? Just take a partial payment. If the alternative is getting nothing while being investigated by the police, yes, I think they might. I tapped my fingers on the table thinking, but we need leverage. Something to make them take the deal seriously. Michael was quiet for a moment, then his eyes widened. The records, he said. I kept records of everything, all my bets, all my losses, all my communications with Mercer's operation. Names, dates, amounts. I was paranoid about being cheated. Now it was my turn to be surprised. You have documentation of their illegal gambling operation, he nodded. It's encrypted on a cloud drive. I can access it from any computer. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. That's our leverage, evidence that could strengthen the police case against them. Michael looked uncertain. Dad, these people are dangerous. If we try to negotiate with them directly, we don't, I interrupted. We go through a lawyer, someone with experience in criminal matters who can act as an intermediary. The police won't like this. Probably not, I agreed. But it's not about what they like, it's about ending this as quickly and safely as possible. Michael stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, if you think this will work, I'm in. Good. First thing tomorrow, I'll ask Detective Reeves for a recommendation for a criminal defense attorney, someone who can represent us both. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the path ahead. I was proposing to liquidate assets that had taken me a lifetime to build, to pay off debts my son had accumulated through criminal activity and poor choices. It went against everything I believed in about responsibility and consequences, but it also felt like the only way forward, the only way to ensure our safety and begin the long process of rebuilding, not just our external circumstances, but our relationship as father and son. Martha would understand, I thought. She always had a clearer view of the bigger picture than I did. Sometimes you have to lose something to gain something greater, she used to say. I wasn't sure what we stood to gain from this mess, but I hoped it would be worth the cost. The next morning, I spoke with Detective Reeves about finding a lawyer. She was reluctant at first, clearly understanding that we were planning to diverge from the police strategy of building a case against Mercer. Mr. Harmon, she said carefully, I understand your desire to resolve this quickly, but paying these people off could complicate our investigation, and it doesn't guarantee your safety. Nothing guarantees our safety, I pointed out. Not even staying in this safe house indefinitely. We need to take control of the situation. After some persuasion, she provided the name of a criminal defense attorney she respected, Alina Chen, a former prosecutor who now specialized in complex criminal cases. I called Miss Chen from the safe house phone, explaining our situation in broad terms. She agreed to meet us at the safe house that afternoon, a courtesy she extended after Detective Reeves vouched for the urgency of our case. Alina Chen arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. She was a small woman, perhaps in her late 40s, with sharp eyes behind stylish glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. This was someone who knew what she was doing. After introductions, we sat in the living room and I laid out the situation in detail. Michael's gambling debts, the attempted loan fraud, the threats, and my desire to negotiate a settlement. Miss Chen listened without interruption, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she turned to Michael. I need to see these records you mentioned, she said. Everything you have on Mercer's operation. Michael used the safe house laptop to access his encrypted drive and showed her the documentation he'd kept, spreadsheets of bets and losses, screenshots of conversations with bookies, even photos he'd surreptitiously taken of the backroom operation where high-stakes games were held. Miss Chen reviewed everything carefully, her expression giving nothing away. Finally, she closed the laptop and looked at us both. You have good leverage, she said. This documentation would be valuable to the ongoing investigation. However, approaching Mercer directly with this could be dangerous. He might see it as blackmail rather than negotiation. That's why we want you to do it, I explained. As a legal intermediary, she nodded. I can approach Mercer's attorney, and yes, men like him always have attorneys. I can propose a settlement of the debt in exchange for ceasing all contact and threats. The documentation you have will be the unspoken leverage. How much should we offer? I asked. Miss Chen considered. In situations like this, starting with 50 cents on the dollar is reasonable. Be prepared to go up to 75 cents if necessary. Anything more than that and you might as well pay the full amount. I did the quick math. Even at 50 cents on the dollar, we were talking about $125,000. It would mean selling the land in New York at a minimum, possibly taking a loan against my house after all, though a legitimate one from a bank, not a fraudulent one from criminals. And you think they'll take it? Michael asked, doubt evident in his voice. Given the heat they're under from the police investigation, yes, I think they might, Miss Chen replied. Men like Mercer ultimately care about money and staying out of prison. If they can secure a significant payment and potentially reduce the evidence against them, it's a rational business decision to take the deal. How quickly can we move on this? I asked. I can make contact today, she said, but preparing the necessary documentation and arranging for the payment will take time. I'd estimate a week to 10 days before we can finalize anything. Another week or more in the safe house. Another week of limbo, but at least now we had a direction, a plan that didn't involve simply waiting for the police to solve our problems. "Do it," I said, "and send me the paperwork I need to start liquidating assets." After Miss Chen left, Michael turned to me, his expression troubled. "Dad, are you sure about this? You're talking about potentially selling property that's been in our family for generations, taking loans against the house you built with Mom, all to fix my mistakes." I looked at my son, really looked at him. Behind the fear and the guilt, I could still see traces of the boy I'd raised, the man Martha and I had hoped he would become. He'd lost his way, made terrible choices, but he wasn't beyond redemption. No one was. "I'm sure," I said. "But Michael, this is it. The one time I bail you out. After this, you're on your own financially, and you'll need to find a way to pay me back eventually, even if it takes the rest of your life." He nodded solemnly. "I understand. And I will, Dad. I promise." Promises from Michael didn't hold much weight with me anymore, but it was a start, a commitment to a different future than the one he'd been heading toward. Now we just had to survive long enough to see it. The negotiation moved more quickly than Miss Chen had anticipated. Within 3 days, she had made contact with Mercer's attorney, a slick corporate lawyer named Drummond who specialized in keeping his morally flexible clients just on the right side of the law. "Drummond sees the writing on the wall," Miss Chen explained during her second visit to the safe house. "The police investigation is gaining momentum. Mercer's operation is under scrutiny. They're motivated to resolve this quickly." "And the terms?" I asked. "They've countered our offer of $125,000 with $200,000, she said. "I believe we can settle at $175,000. That would be 70% of the original debt." I nodded, having already prepared myself for this range. "And they're guarantees of our safety. A signed agreement that the debt is considered paid in full, with no further collection efforts or contact with either of you. Drummond understands that any violation would result in Michael's evidence being turned over to the police." It wasn't perfect, but it was the best we could hope for under the circumstances. I had already started the process of selling the land in upstate New York, 50 acres of woodland that had been in my family for 3 generations. The real estate agent estimated it would fetch around $120,000 in the current market. I had also spoken with my bank about a home equity line of credit for the remaining amount. "Let's do it," I said. "Counter with $175,000 and push for a quick resolution." Miss Chen nodded. "I'll call Drummond right away." As she stepped outside to make the call, Michael looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and shame. "I don't deserve this, Dad, after what I tried to do to you." "No, you don't," I agreed, my tone gentle but firm. "But sometimes life isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we need to move forward." Miss Chen returned 15 minutes later, a hint of satisfaction on her usually impassive face. Drummond accepted the counter. "We're settling at $175,000. He's drafting the agreement now. We should have it by tomorrow morning." Relief washed over me. After weeks of uncertainty and fear, we had a path forward. It would be expensive, painfully so, but it would end this nightmare, or so I thought. That night something woke me from a fitful sleep, a sound that didn't belong. I lay still, listening. The safe house was usually quiet at night, with only the occasional creak of settling wood or the distant sound of a passing car. This was different. A soft thud, followed by what sounded like footsteps. I slipped out of bed and moved silently to the door, easing it open just enough to peer into the hallway. Darkness. The officer on duty should have been in the living room, visible from where I stood, but I saw no one. Something was wrong. I crossed the hall to Michael's room, entering without knocking. He was asleep, oblivious to whatever had woken me. I shook him gently. "Michael," I whispered, "wake up, something's not right." He came awake instantly, fear sharpening his senses. "What is it?" "I heard something, and the officer isn't at his post." We both froze as another sound reached us, the distinct creak of the floorboard near the kitchen, one we'd both learned to avoid during our stay. Someone was in the house. Someone who didn't know which boards creaked. "The bathroom," I whispered. "It has a window." We moved silently across the hall to the bathroom, closing and locking the door behind us. The window was small but big enough for us to squeeze through. I worked the latch, trying to minimize the noise, and pushed it open. "You first," I told Michael. He hesitated. "Dad, go," I insisted. "I'm right behind you." Michael climbed onto the toilet and squeezed through the window, dropping to the ground outside with a soft thud. I followed, my older bones protesting at the awkward escape. Once outside, we crouched beneath the window, catching our breath and listening. The night was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic on the main road. The safe house was on a cul-de-sac in a sleepy suburb, with neighboring houses dark at this late hour. The patrol car that should have been at the end of the street was nowhere to be seen. "Where's the police?" Michael whispered. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we need to move. Now." We skirted the edge of the property, staying in the shadows, and made our way to the street. My car was parked in the driveway, keys kept in the kitchen drawer as per police instructions. Useless to us now. "We need to get to a neighbor's house," I said. "Call 911. As we started toward the closest home, headlights suddenly illuminated the street, a car turning into the cul-de-sac, moving slowly. We froze, pressing ourselves against a hedge. The car stopped in front of the safe house. Two men got out, their silhouettes visible in the dim street lighting. One was tall and lean, the other shorter and stockier. They moved with purpose toward the front door, which was partially open, a detail I hadn't noticed during our escape. "Cooper," Michael breathed, recognizing the taller figure. "And that's one of Mercer's guys." My blood ran cold. Somehow they had found us, had bypassed police protection, were inside the house looking for us even now. "We need to get out of here," I said. "The main road. We can flag down a car, get to a phone." We moved along the edge of the properties, keeping to the shadows, our eyes constantly scanning for any sign of additional threats. The distance to the main road seemed impossibly far, though it couldn't have been more than a quarter mile. Behind us, we heard a shout from the direction of the safe house. They had discovered our absence. "Run," I urged Michael, abandoning stealth for speed. We sprinted through the darkened yards, no longer caring about noise or visibility. All that mattered was reaching the main road, finding help, surviving this night. The sound of a car engine revving spurred us on. They were coming after us. Just as we reached the final yard before the main road, I heard the squeal of tires on pavement. Headlights swept across us as the car pulled out of the cul-de-sac and accelerated in our direction. "There." I pointed to a dense cluster of bushes near the property line. "Hide." We dove into the shrubbery just as the car sped past, its headlights illuminating the spot where we'd been standing moments before. Through the branches, I could see it was the same vehicle from earlier, a dark sedan with tinted windows. The car slowed, then stopped, reversed. The occupants had spotted something, a disturbance in our flight path perhaps, or movement as we hid. "Stay absolutely still," I whispered to Michael, so low I wasn't sure he could hear me. Car doors opened, footsteps on pavement. The beam of a flashlight swept across the yard, coming closer to our hiding place. "They can't have gone far," a voice said, smooth, educated, with a hint of impatience. "Check the bushes." The flashlight beam moved methodically, getting closer to our position with each sweep. I held my breath, pressing myself into the ground, feeling Michael trembling beside me. Just as the light was about to find us, another sound cut through the night, sirens distant but approaching. Multiple vehicles, judging by the overlapping wails. "Shit," the voice cursed. "We need to go." Now, hurried footsteps, car doors slamming, the engine revving. The sedan pulled away with a squeal of tires, heading away from the approaching sirens. We remained hidden, uncertain if this was a reprieve or another threat. The sirens grew louder, then stopped, presumably at the safe house. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance. "Should we go back?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible. I hesitated. The police had arrived, yes, but someone had compromised the safe house. Someone had known where we were. Could we trust that all the officers responding were legitimate? Not yet, I decided. Let's get to the main road, find a public place with a phone. Call Miss Chen. We emerged carefully from our hiding place and continued to the main road, staying vigilant. The street was mostly deserted at this hour, but a few blocks down, I could see the illuminated sign of a 24-hour gas station. We walked quickly, constantly looking over our shoulders, until we reached the fluorescent sanctuary of the convenience store. The young clerk looked up with mild curiosity as we entered, two disheveled men in pajamas at 3 in the morning. Phone? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He pointed to a payphone near the restrooms, a relic in the cell phone age but a lifesaver for us now. I called Miss Chen's emergency number, one she had given us just in case. She answered on the third ring, her voice alert despite the hour. "It's Frank Harmon," I said quickly. "Someone found the safe house, Cooper and one of Mercer's men. We escaped, but we don't know who to trust." "Where are you now?" she asked, all business. I gave her the name of the gas station, visible on a sign above the counter. "Stay there," she instructed. "I'm calling Lieutenant Washington directly. He'll send officers he personally trusts. Don't leave with anyone else." After hanging up, Michael and I waited in the store, buying coffee we didn't want just to justify our presence. The clerk, sensing something was off, kept his distance. 20 minutes later, two police cars pulled into the parking lot. Lieutenant Washington himself emerged from one, along with Detective Reeves. They entered the store, relief evident on their faces when they saw us. "Thank God you're both okay," Washington said. "Officer Daniels was found unconscious in his patrol car 2 blocks from the safe house. Blow to the head. He's in the hospital now." "What about the officer inside?" I asked. Washington's expression darkened. "No sign of him yet." The implications of that statement hung in the air between us. "We need to get you to a new location," Washington continued. "Somewhere Mercer's people won't know about." "No more safe houses," I said firmly. "Someone leaked our location. We can't risk that happening again." Washington didn't argue. "Do you have somewhere else you can go? Somewhere not associated with either of you?" I thought about it, then nodded. "Yes. An old friend from my construction days has a cabin in the Poconos. He only uses it during hunting season. He'd let us stay there." "Good. Detective Reeves will drive you to get some essentials, then take you there. I'll stay here to coordinate the investigation of the safe house breach." As we rode in Detective Reeves's unmarked car, stopping briefly at a 24-hour Walmart for clothes and toiletries, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The worst had happened. Our protection had been compromised, we'd been found, and yet we had survived. We were still moving forward, and the negotiation was still on track. Miss Chen had confirmed that Drummond had sent over the settlement agreement, unaware of the night's events. We would proceed as planned. By dawn, we were deep in the Pocono Mountains, driving up a winding dirt road to Bob Miller's hunting cabin. It was rustic, isolated, and, most importantly, unknown to anyone connected with Mercer or his operation. As Detective Reeves helped us settle in, performing a thorough check of the premises, I found myself thinking of Martha again. What would she make of all this? Her practical nature would probably have her focusing on the solution rather than dwelling on how we got here. "One step at a time," she would say. "Handle what's in front of you." What was in front of us now was clear. Finalize the settlement, pay off the debt, end this nightmare. Then begin the long process of rebuilding both our lives and our relationship. The cabin would be our sanctuary for the next few days as we completed the transaction. Miss Chen would handle the paperwork, the transfer of funds, the legal protections. We would remain hidden, safe, until it was done. At least that was the plan. But as I was learning, plans had a way of going awry when dealing with men like Victor Mercer and James Cooper. Men who saw rules as suggestions and human lives as collateral damage in their pursuit of profit. The worst was not over. Not yet. But for the first time since Michael had handed me that loan agreement with a proud smile, I believed we might actually survive this. The cabin was a single-room structure with a loft, rustic but comfortable, smelling of pine and wood smoke. Detective Reeves did a thorough sweep before leaving us with a satellite phone. Cell service was non-existent this deep in the mountains, and strict instructions to call her twice daily. "I'll be back tomorrow with supplies and updates," she promised. "Stay inside, stay vigilant." After she left, Michael and I moved around the small space awkwardly, like dancers unfamiliar with the steps. Despite everything we'd been through, or perhaps because of it, we still hadn't found our way back to the easy relationship we'd once had. "You should take the bed," Michael said, gesturing to the full-size mattress in the corner. "I'll use the sleeping bag in the loft." I nodded, too tired to argue. The adrenaline of our escape was wearing off, leaving me feeling every one of my 67 years. My knees ached from the mad dash through suburban yards, and my back protested as I sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Michael climbed the ladder to the loft, and soon the cabin was quiet except for the occasional creak of the structure settling and the distant call of birds in the surrounding forest. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the cabin's small windows, and Michael was moving around the kitchenette, the smell of coffee filling the air. "Found some in the cupboard," he explained, seeing me stir. "Instant, but it's better than nothing." I accepted the mug he offered, the warmth seeping into my hands. "What time is it?" "Just after 9. Detective Reeves called on the satellite phone. She's on her way with supplies. And Miss Chen is finalizing the settlement papers. She says everything is on track." I nodded, sipping the coffee. It was terrible, but it was hot and caffeinated, which was all that mattered right now. "Did you sleep?" Michael shrugged. "A little. Kept hearing noises." I understood. After what we'd been through, it would be a long time before either of us slept soundly again. We spent the morning in near silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I found myself staring out the window at the dense forest surrounding the cabin, thinking about the land in New York I was selling, similar terrain, though flatter. Land that had been in my family for generations, passed down from my grandfather to my father to me. Land I had hoped to pass to Michael someday. Now it would go to strangers, its value reduced to numbers in a bank account, then transferred to pay off gambling debts to criminals. The thought left a bitter taste in my mouth, worse than the instant coffee. Around noon, Detective Reeves arrived with groceries, fresh clothes, and news. "We found Officer Morris," she said grimly as she unpacked supplies on the small kitchen table. "In the trunk of his car, about a mile from the safe house. He's alive but in critical condition. Multiple blunt force traumas to the head and torso." My stomach churned. "Will he make it?" "The doctors are cautiously optimistic. He's young, strong." She paused, looking at Michael. "He woke up briefly this morning. Said 2 men ambushed him during his shift, one tall with a scar on his cheek, one stockier with a shaved head." "Sound familiar?" Michael nodded, his face pale. "Cooper and Ramirez, one of Mercer's enforcers." "That confirms it wasn't a random break-in," Reeves said. "They were specifically targeting you." "But how did they find the safe house?" I asked. "It was supposed to be secure." Reeves's expression hardened. "We're investigating that. There may be a leak in the department, or they may have followed one of the officers during a shift change. Either way, Lieutenant Washington is personally overseeing security measures now." "And the settlement?" Michael asked. "Is that still happening?" "Miss Chen says everything is proceeding as planned. Drummond doesn't seem aware of last night's events, or if he is, he's not letting on. The transfer is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Once it's complete and the agreement is signed, this should be over." I wished I could believe that a signature on paper and a transfer of funds would magically erase the danger, the fear, the broken trust. But nothing about this situation had been simple or straightforward from the beginning. What if they take the money and still come after us? I voiced the concern that had been growing in my mind. What if they decide we're too much of a liability? Detective Reeves didn't offer false reassurances. "That's a possibility we've considered, which is why we're preparing another option." She looked between us. "Witness protection. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. You mean new identities? Relocating? Michael asked, sounding stunned. Reeves nodded. If necessary, yes. The evidence you've provided, combined with what we've already gathered, could potentially bring down Mercer's entire operation. That makes you valuable witnesses and valuable targets. I'm 67 years old, I said, the reality of what she was suggesting sinking in. I've lived my entire life in Pennsylvania. My home, my memories of Martha, everything I've built is there. I understand, Mr. Harmon, Reeves said gently. It would be a last resort, only if we determine the threat remains high after the settlement. But it's an option you should be aware of. After she left, promising to return the next morning for the settlement transfer, Michael and I sat in silence again, the weight of this new possibility settling between us. I'm sorry, Michael said eventually, his voice barely above a whisper. This is all my fault. If I hadn't gotten involved with Mercer, if I hadn't tried to get you to take out that loan. If, I cut him off. We can't change what's happened, Michael. We can only deal with what's in front of us now. But witness protection, leaving everything behind, I never wanted this for you. I looked at my son, truly looked at him. Behind the fear and guilt, I could still see the boy who had once promised to build me a house, even better than the ones you make, Dad. The young man who had held my hand at Martha's funeral and sworn he would always be there for me. Somewhere beneath the lies and the mistakes was still my child. We'll cross that bridge if we come to it, I said. For now, let's focus on tomorrow, on ending this debt. Michael nodded, wiping at his eyes. Okay, Dad. That night, as wind rustled through the trees outside and moonlight filtered through the cabin windows, I lay awake thinking about beginnings and endings, about Martha and the life we'd built, about Michael and the man he'd become, and the man he might yet be. If witness protection became our reality, it would mean the end of Frank Harmon, the end of the life I'd known, but perhaps it could also be a beginning, a fresh start for both Michael and me, a chance to rebuild not just our circumstances, but our relationship as father and son. Martha would want that, I thought. She would tell me to look forward, not back, to see the opportunity in the crisis. With that thought, I finally drifted into a fitful sleep, dreaming of houses I'd built and houses yet to come. Morning arrived with a clarity that seemed at odds with the uncertainty of our situation. The sky was a perfect blue, visible through the cabin windows, and the air was crisp with the promise of approaching autumn. Detective Reeves arrived earlier than expected, her expression tight with contained energy. The transfer is set for 10 o'clock. Miss Chen will handle everything electronically. She just needs verbal confirmation from you, Mr. Harmon, to proceed. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and resignation. The money from the land sale had been deposited in my account yesterday. The home equity line of credit had been approved.